Croeso pawb, noswaith da. Welcome to everybody and good evening. My name is Melissa Hinkin, curator at Artist Mundi. I am a white woman with blue eyes in her late 30s. I have curly brown hair that is tied back, and I'm wearing a grey and black stripy jumper and grey polo neck. And I'm in a dark room with a spotlight on my face. This is the 6th At the Table talk, which is running alongside the Artist Mundi 10 exhibition. These talks are presented in partnership with British Council Wales, which we give thanks for their generosity and continued support. This talk focuses on Carolina Caycedo, and she is joined this evening by Liv Brissach, curator at the Northern Norwegian Art Museum, visual artist Bárbara Santos, and facilitator and wilderness guide Fern Smith. We will also be joined by Nikki and Sam, who will be providing British Sign Language, and Amanda will be providing live captions. Captions can be accessed by clicking on the little CC link in the menu bar at the bottom of the screen, or by the link in the chat box. Some of the speakers will be speaking in Spanish, so we have Alexia and Javi who will be undertaking simultaneous translation from Spanish to English. To listen to the audio in English, press the translation button below and select English. Diolch, thank you to Stefan, Kate, Neil and the team at Oriel Davies Gallery in Newtown for their hard work presenting Carolina's exhibition. And thank you to everyone at home for attending. We hope you really enjoyed the conversation this evening. I will now pass over to Carolina, who will be talking us through the artworks at Oriel Davies Gallery. Thank you.
Hola, buenos días, good morning. My name is Carolina. I am a mestiza woman. I'm in my middle 40s. I have straight brown hair, a little bit under my shoulders, and I have red rim glasses. I have a black vest, and I'm in my studio in Los Angeles. I'm very happy to be hosting this conversation with two women who are in Europe, one in Wales, one in Norway, and with my old friend and colleague Bárbara Santos, who's in Bogota. So two mestiza women, two European women in conversation. And maybe we can start showing some of the images, please, of the exhibition we installed at Oriel Davies Gallery in Wales as part of my Artist Mundi presentation. So this is the first room, what receives you when you enter the exhibition. It's an open white space. There's a kind of meandering table that holds the Serpent River book. This is an artist publication that weaves together rivers, geographies, and stories of people across the Americas who have been impacted by the construction of hydroelectric dams and mine tailing dams. There's 3 banners. There's a center banner flanked by a couple of loans that we managed to do for the exhibition. This is one of the loans. It's a loan, a banner loaned from the Greenhand Common Peace Camp. As you may know, some of you may know, the Greenhand Common was an anti-nuclear and environmental protest in the shape of a camp that held the ground in front of Greenhand Common, where a nuclear site was being established. It started actually by a group of Welsh women called Women for Life on Earth. And they held that campground and did several actions to protest that nuclear site. But for me, and I've known the story of Greenhand Common for a number of years and studied their banners, and it really inspires the way that textile protest, messaging, symbolism, messaging comes through these artworks. For me, they're complete artworks, and I wanted to have them in dialogue with my work to provide an entry point for Welsh audiences to some of the themes presented in the exhibition. Maybe we can go to the back, to the previous image really quick. The other image, the other loan from Greenhand Common is this banner you see on the right. It reads "Women for Life on Earth." There's a tree, maybe like with some of its leaves, but some of the other leaves have fallen. There's a symbol, a woman symbol and a peace symbol. But I wanted to include that because it's a special phrase, Women for Life on Earth, and also because it acknowledges how Greenhand Common started, the group that started. And then these two loans are flanking a banner that I did. Maybe we can go to that close up, please, which is a banner that compiles over 140 portraits. They're like ball pen portraits of environmental women leaders from across the world coming together in this piece of fabric. Actually, towards the center left on the lower part, you actually see a rendering of one of the actions of the Greenhand Common. You know, this banner actually includes this portrait, this collective portrait of the Greenhand Common. And portraiture is actually one subject that I visit in the show throughout different series. I always think about portraiture in a collective sense. So not as a way to individualize someone or something or an entity, but actually portraiture as an exercise to highlight and uplift the relationships we have with each another, with each other, and across geographies. This banner is called "My Feminine Lineage of Environmental Struggle," and many of the women portrayed here have been killed for their activism, have been attacked. Some have survived, some have not, or have been legally harassed, because in the global north, maybe activists don't get killed, but get legally harassed and kind of killed in life, if you wish, in the form of fines, prison sentences, and whatnot. When you continue throughout the exhibition at Oriel Davis, you arrive to kind of a middle room. We don't have images of that middle room, but we want to share some stills of the video that's presented in that room. That video is called "Reciprocal Sacrifice." It's a video I did in collaboration with the language department of the Nez Perce tribe in Idaho, in the Pacific Northwest in the United States. And this video talks about the relationship ancestral communities, native communities in the Pacific Northwest have with the salmon relative, with the salmon fish. We thought it was important to bring it to Wales because there's also a salmon population in Welsh rivers. And the video is narrated in first person by a salmon. Of course, the salmon is telling its story of how it's born and spawns in the upper parts of the river, goes down to the sea, comes back again, and how that remembering that salmon embodies year after year has been truncated by the construction of dams on the river. And ultimately, it's calling for a reciprocal sacrifice and asking the human relative to sacrifice. It's our turn to sacrifice, tear down the dams to allow for the survival of the salmon relative. So these are some stills from that video. It's kind of an invitation to remember our original contract with some of our animal relatives. The same way that they sacrifice and come back every year to feed us and to nurture us. Now it's our time to to upheld this contract and sacrifice for them. And then you go into the last room. Well, this is still breach the dams. It's like one of the final calls of the video. And then you go into the last room where you have a series of what I call water portraits. So again, a series of portraits that in this case are depicting bodies of water. In this case, the one on the left side with that very vivid blue stripe is a portraiture of the Santa Ana River or Wanauna River here in Southern California, where I live. It's a river that is sustaining me as a visitor in this land, as a migrant and visitor and guest in this land. So it's a way for me to acknowledge also my relationships with local entities and the local ecosystem that sustains me here in Southern California. And then the image on the right is an image of the San Gabriel River, also a river here in Southern California that unfortunately has been dammed. So I prefer to do the exercise of portraying bodies of water instead of representing them through the more maybe usual way of the landscape format. Also because I understand that landscape has been a way that us as artists have been complicit with reinforcing a colonial gaze and reinforcing kind of a lie that we're not part of the relationships that conform an ecosystem. If you think about a landscape format, it functions like a window through which you look into nature, but you as the viewer are an observer separated from that nature, looking into through this landscape window format. And so that's why the water portraits, the series is an exercise of unlearning from me that colonial gaze, and actually through the construction of images, relaying that I'm not an observer, I'm actually in relationship with these bodies of water because they sustain me as a visitor in this land of Southern California. And if we continue to the next slide, the water portraits are in dialogue with another video called Fuel to Fire. Here you see a still. In the still, you see a palm of a hand holding little bits and pieces of gold, of raw gold that has been washed artisanally by artisanal miners in rivers in Colombia. And throughout my work with communities who have been struggling against different extractivist projects, I've been in touch and I've had the chance to learn and to interact with and from artisanal miners in Colombia and other parts of the Americas. And I started buying some of the raw gold that they would harvest from the river. And the word harvest is actually a word they used to describe what they do, you know, when they harvest the gold. They don't use the word extract gold to separate themselves from larger extractivist enterprises. So they call their activity a harvesting of gold in very artisanal and kind of low impactful ways from the river. And I was buying that gold and did several other videos. And then at some point I felt that I was also in a way falling into an extractivist practice. And actually I remember the first time I returned some gold to the river was with Bárbara. We went to a páramo, to a moor close to Bogota, and I had some gold and I returned some to the river. And I think that was a little bit of the seed of the idea for this video that I did last year and finished editing this year, Fuel to Fire. And it actually follows the pagamento, or the payback, the return of the gold I was holding onto back into a river in Colombia. And so the film is kind of portraying that pagamento or following that pagamento. And then just to close, we also did some interventions on the outer part of Oriel Davis Gallery in Newtown. This is just one of them, but in the different doors that give access to the gallery, we printed a series of plant portraits. Again, this idea and this exercise of portraying a living being. Also understanding that this beings like plants, rivers, forests, mountains, minerals are actually subjects that have agency within ecosystems because they have the power and the agency to change the course of events. For example, jarrow, which is the plant portrayed in this drawing, has the agency to regulate menses. So it's an abortifacient plant. It can help you, it has a profound effect on women's sexual health. And this portrait was done specifically at a time where here in the United States where I live, our sexual and reproductive rights for women have been eroded by the legal system. So it's a way to also do a political commentary. And before I open it up to my compañeras and to my friends here in the panel, I think there's a lot of the intention with my work is asking people to remember, to tap into that collective memory, into that inherited knowledge, the ones that we carry in our memory muscle and that we inherit from our grandmothers, from our mothers, and tap into that collective memory, to that ancestral knowledge, to that accumulated knowledge, to remember the way we relate and we have related from time immemorial to fish, to plants, and to one another. So I wanted to, I have some questions prepared for my fellow panelists, and I wanted to address Liv first. So hi, Liv. And with Liv, we've had the chance to speak more profoundly about my work. A few months ago, Liv wrote the text that is included in the Artes Mundi catalog or booklet. She wrote the text about my work for that, but she also curated or was part of the curatorial team of a show a couple of years ago that was presented in Oslo. That was called Actions of Art and Solidarity. It was presented at the Artist House in Oslo in 2021. And I don't know if there's some images you want to pull up, but the question I have for you, Liv, or maybe you can comment, is like, what are some of the trajectories and genealogies that were laid out in this exhibition? Because I know it had kind of a time frame too, like a bracket of years. And how were the local audiences in Norway were affected? I know there was the pandemic in the middle, so that could have also intersected with this. But also how, for you as a curator that works in an institutional context, how do you think exhibitions are sites for knowledge transmission or to build up these genealogies, in this case of action and solidarity?
Hello, good evening, everyone. My name is Liv, as was mentioned, and my pronouns are they, them. I'm not super strict, so it's okay, Carolina, no offense taken. And a short visual description. I'm a white person with short, light brown hair, wireless glasses, and I'm sitting in a dimly lit office. And it's wonderful to be at the table with you, Carolina. Thank you so much. Also for the question. I'll try to share my screen to show some images from the Actions of Art and Solidarity exhibition, which was curated by the Office for Contemporary Art Norway, OCA, where I worked previously. It was put together by a team with Chief Curator Katja Garcia Anton, myself and my colleagues. So it was an exhibition that explored solidarity starting from out by actually grappling with solidarity as quite a slippery term that is often thrown around, but not so often defined in arts contexts. And many publications and exhibitions that tackle solidarity head on have tended to focus on kind of grand narratives, often in the context of the Cold War. But what we attempted to do with this exhibition was to, on the one hand, acknowledge the Cold War years and a lot of important solidarity narratives that grew out of what became the NAM, the non-aligned nations, that joined together to form a kind of third alternative during the polarized dynamic of the Cold War, and to foster solidarity that didn't only go from the north to the south or the other way around, but also south-south solidarity initiatives. And those were very important and are acknowledged in this exhibition with a few case studies. But on the other hand, the exhibition wanted to focus more on micro narratives of embodied or more situated solidarity, and also to bring in indigenous perspectives and land guardianship or solidarity with the land. And I think that's where Carolina Caycedo's work played a pivotal role. Here it is. This is the work that was included. It's from the Cosmotaraya series, Mother of the Free Waters 1, I believe, from 2019. And this was actually one of the first works that the visitors would see. It's in the entrance area of the artist's house, which also serves as a cafe. So as you enter, you would see this work, and at some moments you would hear in the space a solidarity playlist that was collectively made by many of the artists and organizers of the exhibition and the collaborators. And this playlist was initiated by artist Elin Mar Øyenvister. So this particular work, I think, what came about, you can speak more about this, Carolina, later, but as far as I know, it was a net gifted to the artist from used in river fishing, and then it's been hand dyed and made into the sculptural form. So it really acknowledges the close kind of knowledge and know-how of the river, and brings that into a space where solidarity is grappled with. Some of the main trajectories of the exhibition were that there was a big loan from the MSSA, the Museo de la Solidaridad Salvador Allende in Chile, the Museum of Solidarity, which was initiated by Salvador Allende, and then let me see if I find a good image of that here, and opened as a museum solely based on donations, a kind of solidarity network of donations from all over the world that built an amazing collection. But after the assassination of Salvador Allende and the following political change in Chile, the museum went into exile and became a museum of resistance with multiple offices around, hosted in different locations in France, but also in Sweden. And from that position of exile, the collection also grew the solidarity that it fostered. And then after, when the Pinochet regime ended, the collection went back, and it is now open as the MSSA. And some of the micro narratives that are part of this collection are, if you see the small works hanging from one of the panels, those are called, I believe, arpilleras. They're small embroidered pieces on burlap sacks, on material that would be easily available for all kinds of women. And they would use these to convey messages, hidden political messages, and testimonies of what had happened. A lot of their sons and husbands went missing during those political times, and these could be distributed through illicit networks to send messages. And now many of them are part of the MSSA collection, and they're truly wonderful. So that's sort of one microhistory, but then you also have many well-known artists from all over the world in that collection. This image is from a Norwegian artist called Gitte Dahlin, who moved to Chiapas in Mexico and later Oaxaca, Mexico in the 70s, and where she became an accomplice and an ally to the Zapatista movement, and especially the women of Chiapas. And this work was made after having lived there for over 10 years, and it's called "She Who Carries the Memory of This Earth. Where Does This Earth Carry Her?" So after Carolina's piece in the foyer area, as the visitors went up the stairs, they would be greeted by this work, making this connection between those two artists. That's a sort of very quick. It was a big exhibition of over 70 artists, so I can't go into detail, but I just wanted to answer quickly to the question about knowledge transmission in the exhibition format. And I think that's an important question, and beyond simply knowledge, I think if we think about the exhibition as a site where you can, through senses, get an insight into knowledge, but also know-how and processes of learning through also emotions, through feeling and relating. It offers an experience that hopefully can, in some instances, lead to new thoughts, new social imaginaries, and perhaps also mobilizations and actions in the second step. But I think what we wanted to highlight in this particular exhibition was the ways in which artists have been central in fostering these alternative social imaginaries through particular political contexts, but also in the kind of smaller microcosms of relating to rivers, to dams, to new technology, to really focus on the situatedness of that, and to offer us sort of 70-year span of various microhistories from contexts all over the world, to have a set of references that are that can inspire and create these imaginaries, and believing that we need to look back at that from the situation where we are today, also moving into the future with a need for solidarity. I think I'll end there if I answered your questions, Carolina.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Liv, and apologies for the mixing up of the pronouns. But,
no worries.
Yeah, it's really beautiful to see like this exhibition. I didn't see it in person, but I looked at the images, the booklet, which is I think available online, and I invite folks to visit that booklet. It's really beautiful and complete. The sophistication of politically engaged art, the formal sophistication of a lot of it. Like, for example, the arpilleras have been a huge inspiration to my work. This use and sophistication with the use of textile as a medium associated to feminine labor in a way, but that can carry these strong political and solidarity messages that can become tools of, communication in dire moments or moments of oppression. And I really love this work that is, and I think can take us and dovetail us to the question I have for Bárbara Santos. And this work called She Who Carries the Memory of This Earth. Where does Earth carry her? But, how women in native and ancestral communities carry and sustain some sort of natural order and have a specific role in this orders, as Bárbara calls them. I'm still learning. But Bárbara, you have been working for over, a decade, for many years, with different ancestral and indigenous communities in Colombia, in the Paraná River, in the Amazon Basin, in the Sabana of Bogotá, I think more recently with the Muisca community. And there's been different outcomes of these collaborations, alternative cartographies, publications, right? And I'm always very impressed in the ethical and the protocols you follow when translating this information between worlds, and being so careful of the relationships you develop with these communities, and how also some of this information can arrive to us in a more Western world or Western context. So maybe you can talk a little bit about that, maybe especially also a little bit more about the current book you're working with the women from Paraná too, Las Guardianas de las Semillas. But please take it on.
Bueno, muchas gracias, Carolina, por la invitación.
Thank you so much, Carolina, for the invitation, for how all these years of sharing this experience of a territorial experience, how we walk along side by side, and how we also articulate with the voices of those territories. And so my name is Bárbara Santos. I am Colombian. I am a mestiza woman. I have long hair. I am dressed in black. I am 47 years old. And well, to answer a little bit of your questions, Carolina, I don't know if maybe we can look at the images.
Maybe you want to start. We had a little chat before our meeting too, and we were talking about that phrase that appears in the banner, "Woman for Life on Earth." Maybe you want to start with that, like maybe relaying a little bit of the conversation we had this morning.
Sí, para mí fue un...
Yes, for me, it was very activating to see the images of the exhibition that you have done, your work that I am very familiar with for a while, but also the force of bringing these collective memory images that take place that in this world where we have this very potent phrase from this Greenham Common. This phrase that you bring to this show, and this Women for Life on Earth, and seeing this, it really helped me kind of ground in the work that we do in ways that are careful and sustained through time, to really hold that phrase. It kind of makes you realize that there's a process of certain feminine force in the work that we do. I don't think that just because we're feminists, or at least I can speak for myself, but rather it is a force that we have, Carolina and I, being Colombian women, and and understanding the complexity of a territory that has been colonized in such complex ways and in many levels, and to understand how women are the ones who sustain life. And the stories and the works, artworks that we do, there are various layers of that force of this phrase, right? That sustains our activism at a global level, and forces that are weaving in to this strength that women have. And also thinking of the book that I'm gonna start from the end like I usually do, but 18 years ago I had worked in the Paraná River, and it is a river in the Colombian Amazon, which has a lot of an ancestral knowledge. It has been sustained through the resistance of a few people who live in the jungle, really who preserve a really profound ancestral wisdom that even though there have been many different Western influences that have arrived to the territory, like this hunting for skin at the beginning of the 20th century, at the 19th, at the end of the 19th and beginning of the 20th century. If you can say, can you show the previous image? This is the first book that we worked on together in 2005 and 2015. It was a 10-year process so the book could materialize. And this knowledge and wisdom that these people have is there's over 90 indigenous researchers who don't really research, they are just are. And to the extent that they have made an effort to tell the world, like the external world, that's how they name all of our experiences. People here, we're the external world to them. And how working from their strength, sort of the codes that they work from, how they live life, is what they have been trying to tell us, but in ways almost like dripping or by drops. Speaking of protocols and translation practices, these are books that are short editions. These are books that they have decided that are they are for the internal use of in service to the river, and for the youth to understand what the influence and force that come from the Western world and also in the jungle. So they want certain people to synchronize with that wisdom. And in this practice of women on life for life on earth, maybe you can show the next image. Here you see this book. I don't know how to say it. It's sort of in the skeleton of the book, because this is the real book.
A blueprint. Este es realmente el libro.
Like a,
Es un libro inédito.
but really this is the book. This has just been printed from the publishing house very recently, like a few couple of days. We have been celebrating this process as well, in which now it's women who have been working together for 8 years now. We're the ones that want to tell that work that they do in their gardens, especially how they codify that information that sustain our life and that keep them and us alive. And so entering again into this phrase like women on for life on earth, I really felt and understood that these are sort of the manifestations of what Carolina does and what I do are manifestations of different dimensions of the same existence in the world. There is sort of a pressure, a global pressure, or a global strength or counterpart where life is being sustained by women. And this is a book that is born through that. Again, very few people may receive this essence and the order and the caring of the seeds. So many times we consume seeds that have been processed, who have been taken away or displaced from their original sites. But seeds are people, and they have this wisdom, and this wisdom and knowledge is connected. And that information and that knowledge really allows us to work with these multiple entities, is what women right now want to share to the external world, but little by little, sort of by drops, and build sort of a network that can really take care of the feminine essence in the Amazon jungle, and how to materialize this work, right, that I've also seen in that Liv's exhibition. Because we see this synchronicity in a very particular, unique way. I'm talking about a river that is very distant, that's very specific, but it almost, there's like this worldly order, a desire to go back to that primal order, to really be affirmed in the fact that women are the ones who sustain life. Of course, this work is done through people who know, who sort of sages, who accompany women so that they can sustain themselves through time and have an integral practice and life. I know that we're not going to talk about this specific subject, but it comes up for me right now. I couldn't not mention it. The carbon credits, which arrive to the river, and because of preserving the jungle preservations, they're displacing the people who are trying to steward the rivers and the lands, right? And a simple exercise that this book brings to life is the importance of smoke. The smoke that comes out when the jungle is on fire. They manage fire also like another living being who has its own strength. They know very well what years, what times of the year to work with the fire and how fire brings back life. So when with these land that the women are burning, and they move through the land so that the land doesn't get overspent or overused. So they do these burning of the land has to do with the seeds agencies that are there, that are part of the land. And many times these Western policies or global policies don't allow us to understand the tenderness that controlled fire does. That these are practices that are ancestral. This smoke is sort of a breast milk from for the plants. So this book really kind of focuses on that. Let's try to understand a different way of seeing the world, to know that there are different ways of codifying life. And I think that that is what I've been trying to do for now almost 20 years, in which I am still a student. I am the one who comes and accompanies there, but I am really getting a little bit older, but I see how all this work synchronizes with other things, which is, I don't know if we can show some images, or I can share a little more.
On the next images you have. I know it would be important.
Vale, entonces, could we see the next image?
This one?
Listo, entonces aquí es
Oh,
al anterior.
yeah.
That one prior.
No, the river basin.
The river basin image.
Delay of what you're seeing. So you mean
Oh.
the next one, the next one. Yes.
La cuarta, Caro, pero sí, sí creo que tengo un
The fourth
retorno.
image, but I do think that I do have a delay.
Bueno, aquí quería mostrarles cuando
I
hablamos
wanted to show you on here when we talk about Amazon jungle, what it is that we're talking about. This is the basin in the jungle, which includes Venezuela, Peru, Ecuador, Brazil. And the white area is completely deforested. The gray areas are areas who are in very, very high risk of pollution. And only the very green parts are the parts that are protected because they are part of natural resources or indigenous lands. So there's an urgency. Why this information that women have stewarded this wisdom? Sometimes they say, why do we need to tell the world, external world, how we work internally? But to this, there is sort of a desire to be reciprocal and build together, sort of that strength, that is the life collective strength. There's a little note from the interpreters, if you can speak a little bit slower.
Next image.
Can we do the next image, please?
Bueno, y acá, si ven,
Well, so as you can see here, there's an image that's very small on the table, which represents the wisdom house that represents all of that Amazon basin that we were just looking at. And if you see what's on the tablet, there's sort of a blueprint to the house. That blueprint is the very same borders of the basin that we were looking at. So in some way, we may create sacred cartography that expands through time, and different tools are utilized so that we are able to, especially us in the Western world, that I can understand the complexity in this wisdom and the complexity of the navigating of this lifestyle, right? It's the jungle life, it's the trees, the rivers, the water, all of the species that conform this home. And so the work of interpreting that home, how to come in, how to come out, what comes in and out of that house, what they you constantly practice in their territory. So there may be a sort of sacred balance, life balance.
next one. Y bueno, este fue el otro libro que hicimos.
And well, this is the other publication that we created. I was the author, but it was actually very sad because it is a lot of indigenous people and me. So I really wanted the authorship to be collective, and these are still things that are difficult to achieve. This is a book that we started working on in 2014, and then we wrapped up 2017, and we were just wondering about the Western technologies and how we have to do very conscious work about the power that these technologies have, well, indigenous technologies and also Western technologies, to generate correlations and interactions. And this book, the book that we see here, this is a publication that for us, it is a gadget. It is a gadget for oral history. You know, the memory not only stays there, but this is also a gadget that allows us to engage in oral discourse, and that they are also able to share their seeds and to bring their information and knowledge with them, to be able to share it with their children, the different peoples in the region, and this work that, you know, we do specially for them. And I think that I'll stop there. And I think I told a little bit of what we're doing, and this vital energy where the seeds and, let's say, the artilleras that Caro made, these are technologies that they also have a memory within them, have the oral tradition within them, ancestral memories, and that are still echoing until today. So, you know, in museums or in traveling all these flows of trying to understand life and land.
And I think it's important to note that in that work that women do across the world, there's different ways of embodying that, no? From what Women for Life on Earth as a Welsh group started and walked as an activist kind of protest to establish the camping Greenham Commons. That's kind of an outward gesture, right? In contrast or in tandem or in conversation to what the women of the Pirá Paraná do, which is kind of an internal work of sustaining life order, no? And not with an activist impulse, but it's just an everyday labor, no? It's like an everyday sacred, but also just everyday labor, no? And work.
Una resistencia
It's like
profunda.
It is
Yeah.
a really deep resistance. It's a profound resistance.
And now I want to address Fern Smith, who is very close to Newtown, where we have the show at Oriel Davis, and that I had the chance to meet recently and work with her in a project called Climate Lab. But Fern, I know that you know, and in Climate Lab, you are the designer, one of the designers of this project that brings together scientists and artists to open and to hold a space to unpack the emotions that scientists who are dealing with climate change data and research feel, no? And again, this idea of feeling, like how do we generate spaces for what in Spanish we call sentir pensar, which there's not a like real translation to English, but we could say feel thinking, no? Like we can't separate the one from the other, though we've trained to do so. And I think what the work that all of us do, Liv through her curation, Bárbara, and you, is to try to weave those two aspects of our process together, sentir pensar, to think, feel. And I wanted to ask you about the different facilitations you do. You also have a project called Emergence, so maybe you can unpack what Emergence is for the public. What are the kind of facilitations you do through this platform or project? I know some of them are kind of more, you know, group-wise, like the Climate Lab, but I also know that you facilitate and host other spaces during very specific moments like equinoxes and solstices too. So maybe you can tell us a little bit about that, please, and maybe the role of healing, because I know you're a therapist, a craniosacral therapist too. So yeah, these are some of the some of the prompts for you.
Great, thank you so much, Carolina, and a real blessing to be here. Thank you for inviting me to your sit-down table conversation. So my name is Fern Smith, and I am in Mid Wales, as Carolina mentioned, not so far from Oriel Davis, where the Artist Mundi exhibition is. And actually, I live in a house called Nant y Gwenith, and Nant is in Welsh brook, or a body of water. So I'm speaking to you, knowing that you really are a champion and lover of water, a water lover. And yeah, so there's something about being in this place, Nant y Gwenith. So I identify as she, her, and I'm sitting in the studio here where we welcome artists. So Nant y Gwenith, as well as our home, is a space, a retreat space, and we bring artists here to make, to work, to rest, to retreat. And we also run retreats as well. So I am in the, I was going to say, the foothills of eldership. Someone said to me, so I'm 59, going to be 60 next year. So I have long grey hair and black rimmed glasses. And as you can see, the space is very red behind me. So something about the kind of the colour. Yeah, there's something about this place which supports life. I used to live in Swansea. I ran a theatre company there. I co-directed a theatre company called Volcano Theatre. And actually this last decade or so has seen a massive transition in my work. In a way, a dropping away of practice, my old practice, as someone who made theatre, toured theatre, small scale, sometimes verging on middle scale theatre, nationally and internationally. I always had a sense that the artists change things. In a way, the internal and the external space. I always knew if I stood in front of a work of art, literally my cells, my body changes. So if I had some kind of machine to be able to measure kind of cellular, hormonal or chemical exchange before and after seeing a work of art that literally moves me, I know that I am bodily, in my body, changed. So there's something I've always had, this sense that art changes us and it changes our environment. And actually knowing that there is really kind of questioning this sense of the I, which is separate from the environment. So my journey has really gone from being a performer and director of physical theatre. And I really undertook a research, an inquiry for myself. Actually, it came at a time where I felt like I really wanted to stop making theatre, to stop making art. I actually felt like I was becoming quite disillusioned with what was happening. Most of the conversations I was having at the time involved funding within the sector. And so I was having conversations with artists who the first thing that we were speaking about was funding and the lack of it. And so there was something that I felt that we were stuck, I was stuck, and actually I wanted to stop. And at that time, I became CLAW Leadership Programme, the CLAW Fellow for Wales on the CLAW Leadership Programme, national and international programme for fostering leaders within the arts. It's based in the UK, but there are fellows from all over the world, and it's been running, getting on for 2 decades now. And in 2010, I was CLAW Fellow for Wales. And also at that time, what was happening in Wales, so I suppose in terms of a kind of meta-narrative and my kind of personal narrative as part of that, there was something called One Planet, One Wales. And the whole idea behind it was that in Wales, we used three times more resources than we should be using in order to all live on the same planet. So there was a real sense, actually, and there was real radical policy initiatives going on. And so there was this sense of how could we become a one planet Wales using fair share of resources. So I was really interested in this question, and actually it was this question that I spoke to people. In a way, I took this question everywhere, and it led me on a transformative journey from making theatre to actually making spaces. So there was probably something that I felt as a theatre practitioner, I had to fill the space, and our company had to fill the space. And actually now there's something about making space that I'm really interested in. So as a craniosacral therapist, I mean, I became really interested in body work. I mean, I was a physical theatre performer, and there was something about really wanting to get a sense of what it means to have a body. And to work with the body in not an extractive way. I mean, actually, I was seeing a lot of burnout in the arts and in theatre. I felt I was burning out myself in a way, the kind of extractivist model. We would make a show and literally perform it, and then we'd go out, speak to the audience, and even friends would say, "What are you doing next?" So it was always the question, "Wow, this was fantastic." Less than 5 minutes later, "What are you doing next?" And it was uncanny, actually, pretty much all over the world. We were asked that question. So there was something about what comes next, what comes next. And so, this sense of, in a way, being an artist who doesn't necessarily create anything, but who holds the space for something to happen. So there was a kind of whole transitional period for me where I left my theatre company, and the theatre company is still going, and I moved towards, in a way, kind of becoming interested in what happens when we create space and we have an intention for inviting people into it and to see what wants to happen. And actually within this meta narrative of what is the artist's role in a transition to a sane society, a sustainable future. I mean, that word sustainable was used very, very much in the kind of the narrative in Wales. And actually from the One Planet, One Wales policies, it actually, the well-being of future generations bill, which is now an act, came into being. And people, I knew, I was talking to artists from other places, and they were saying, "Wow, what's happening in Wales is really interesting, really exciting." And there was something that I felt, actually, there's the radical policies, and what about the practice? And what is the role of the artist within all of this as well? So craniosacral therapist, 1 day of the week, facilitating climate lab on another day of the week, perhaps doing my small art practice another day of the week. I really scaled back my art practice. And I also had this kind of, this idea, maximum participation, minimum administration. And I suppose I've also kind of fallen off the wagon of the kind of more professional funding sector. And so most things that I do, there's a different funding model. So I was also interested in that. And as an artist who doesn't have, a big, what they called inheritance as well, how can we work and there be a different funding model? To also know that to have impact in these grand narratives, we don't have to just do big stuff.
I mean,
do you want to share images and speak about them, or?
I think so.
Yeah,
let's have a few pictures. Yeah, so actually I was talking about the kind of the big stuff. So in 2012, it was the time of the Olympics. In the UK, we were hosting the Olympics, and I kind of felt like, wow, let's do something big and let's do something ambitious, and really have the kind of sustainability Olympics in Wales. And I felt that it should be, and it could be, artists who are running the show. And so there was about a year's worth of funding and work to create something called the Emergence Summit. And before the summit was a massive, what we called a land journey. We wanted to use pilgrimage and in a way to work with that sacred language, the powerful language, but some people said the word pilgrimage is a bit triggering. So let's use neutral language. And again, I kind of think there's something about this neutrality of language, like sustainability. It's kind of, you know, we use language that doesn't scare the horses. We're not going to, you know, talk about earth wisdom or sacredness. And so actually we called this a land journey. But of course, what we were doing there was creating sacred space. So before the summit, which was at Centre for Alternative Technology, so this was something that I collaborated on, and it was collaborations at every single level for that. So it was this idea of how do we come together and see what wants to emerge. So again, this principle of emergence, having an intention to speak to a changing agenda, one where we're feeling as artists, we're either, are we hospice workers or are we midwives? And to say, actually, we need to be dismantling and destroying old structures, or can we kindly let them fall apart? So knowing that the artists, we had a role within that. And also that there are, yeah, actually we can go on to the next one, thank you. There's a role of the artist to be not just the hospice worker, but the midwife. And here is one of the most incredible midwives that I had the privilege to sit down and have a conversation with. And really, Emergence's work and all of the work that I do with facilitation, it is about how do we create sacred space to have these conversations that change us and they change our world. And by that, I believe they change the world. So for me, the work of art is the conversation now. So this is Susie Gablick, and I was lucky enough, I had an Arts Council grant back in nearly a decade ago to go and meet Susie Gablick. Now, she had written a book called Has Modernism Failed? Really significant book published by Thames and Hudson. And it was really speaking about the kind of the grand, hyper-masculine, hyper-inflated, hyper-capitalist, modernist projects, and to really question the efficacy and the ethics of that agenda. And after she wrote that book, which I'd say is in the vein of being the hospice worker, she wrote a book called The Reenchantment of Art. And I came across many, many artists who said to me, you must, if you want to look at the artist's role as a change maker, as a catalyst for a life-sustaining society, you have to read The Reenchantment of Art. So I sat down with Susie, knee to knee, and we had 2 days of the most significant conversation of my life, really. And she passed, she died 2 years ago. And actually, since then, we had regular phone conversations, and pretty much every project that I did, I spoke to her about. And Climate Lab, I spoke to her about as well. So I always felt that she was a kind of definitely a guide and a guardian, really holding ancestral wisdom for me. And she was an active collaborator in so much of the work that I've done. Let's see what's on the next slide. I don't know, it'll be a surprise. Wow. So this is, we're going to see some of the land of Wales here. So really bringing in the land and the spirit of the place. This is Rhossili Beach in the Gower in South Wales. And this was a piece of art which was again a traveling conversation. And it was using consciously working with a change process. So as a facilitator, I'm really interested in that change is a process. It's not just an on and off switch. As a facilitator and as an artist, how do I, in a way, hold the space for change? And so this was called The Walk That Reconnects, inspired by another kind of great elder and teacher for me, Joanna Macy, systems theorist and philosopher. And she's one of the elders who is still with us. And her work, the work that reconnects, is about, in a way, healing this division between people and nature, to know that we are nature. So the walk that reconnects went through a process of change, and I mean, yeah, I imagine that the people who come are artists and activists. In a way, that's probably who I hold space for. I feel like I work with the people who work with the people. And this was at the end of a 4-day journey. A lot of what I do as a facilitator is also curate and commission other artists. So to know that there's something that, even if I cannot mention the word sacred, because some people will say that's a difficult word and that's alienating for people and it won't attract people. If I bring in and make space for an artist, the sacred comes. And this is actually a labyrinth that was created by artists on the beach, based on the shape of the shark's labyrinth.
Fern,
Yeah.
I don't mean to be rude and cut you, but just I think we can go a little bit over time because we have the structure to do it, but I also want to be respectful of the audience's time. We're
Yes.
supposed to cut at the half an hour.
Right.
So in 8 minutes. So I wanna, and thank you. Like there was, like,
Yes,
thank you for bringing Susie and, you know, the elders, and like to talk about that very personal genealogy of yours. I appreciate that. That's something I aim for to do in my work, to build my very personal genealogies. And maybe I invite Liv and Bárbara to turn on their cameras too. And I know you don't know each other from before, but hopefully listening to each other, you can feel and see the connections between your work that I do see and that I feel. And that was my intention. So hopefully you can perceive those connections. But I wanted to open it up to the public in case there was any questions or comments for the panelists before some of you have to leave. I think there's a Q&A here. There's a question by Anonymous attendee for Carolina. What are the resonances in Wales with the ideas and issues present in your work? Well, I would say, you know, without knowing Wales that well, and just being barely familiar with some of its history, I would say that there is maybe an experience of colonization too, an occupation, and which we have experienced in Latin America too, no? And how in this contemporary realm you have to grapple with those experiences and still live and thrive within that occupied and colonial context, right? And yeah, how sometimes we forget we're like in this context, and sometimes how that can also push us and bring us to a dignified rage that moves us into doing what we do, what we call la digna rabia, or this dignified rage. The question is also for Fern, so I don't know, Fern, if you want to address that directly the question, what are the resonances in Wales with ideas and issues present in your work, in Carolina's work? But for me, and just before I let Fern respond, the fact that there's like a living language that is different than the rest of language present in the island, or in the set of islands that conform Britain, or what we call Britain, no? And how that language, at least for me, connects, and what Fern was saying, to very deep ancestral knowledge, so how Wales within a Western geography seems to have a connection to something different, or something not different, but, or maybe, yeah, different, diverse, maybe that's. Fern.
I'm gonna be really short on this, and actually I just want to mention Heddwch Nain Mam Gi. So some people may be aware of it, so I'll be speaking a little bit laterally to the question.
Is there a possibility that you could type that for the interpreter, please?
It's grandma's piece, or grandmother's piece. Yeah, Heddwch Nain Mam Gi, grandmother's piece. So 100 years ago, in 1923, 60% of the women in Wales signed a petition. This was part of the Welsh League of Nations Union, the Women's Committee. So it was after the First World War, and the women of Wales came together, and they created a petition which is 7 miles long. I can't believe this, 7 miles long, 100 years ago. So it's marking the centenary this year. And this was in a way to bring these ideas about women and peace. And this was taken to the women of America. And it was about this idea of women inspiring campaigns on peace after the horrors of First World War. So in a way it was presented, it was gifted, nearly 400,000 women signed this petition. And appealing to the women of America from home to home, hearth to hearth, to join them. So I think that there's something stirring at this time as well with the women in Wales. It went to the Smithsonian, and now this year, I believe it has come back. So it's returned to Wales. So in a way, a kind of, I don't know if that's a micro narrative or a meta narrative, but something about Wales and the women of Wales really being here at this time. And of course, the Greenham women were from this landmass too. So I'm going to pass over to somebody else. So thank you so much.
Yeah, but maybe as you talked, it made me think, like contemporary academia and art world and kind of woke discourses, we talk about the global north, we talk about the global south. But as someone from the global south who lives in the north, in a place like California, in a monstrous city like Los Angeles, I recognize souths here in the north. I recognize them now. There's not such a clear division of where Latin America ends. Is it San Diego? Is it Los Angeles? Is it San Francisco? Or where those global souths and global collateral damage, the way we support life on Earth through the extraction that is exerted over our lands and our bodies, how you can find the majority of sacrifice zones that exist in the world in the global south, and those that are in the north are either in an indigenous reservation, in a BIPOC neighborhood, right? And so I could recognize the global south in Wales, though it is in a place that we call Great Britain or England or whatnot. Great Britain, no? So I think that was special for me. You know, when I visited Newtown, and when we had a chance to loan those banners from the Greenhand Commons. Do we have any other questions and answers? Or maybe Bárbara and Liv and Fern, do you have questions or comments for each other? So take it away.
I have a question, if you don't mind, and I see that we only have 10 minutes, so we'll try to be brief. But I knew that you, Carolina, wanted to talk about kind of access to ancestral wisdom and technologies, and the sort of ethics around that. And I wanted to ask you that question, actually, and also Bárbara, because I understood she has access to quite a few of these, you know, ancestral knowledges, and in the process of creating books, translating oral traditions into written form, what kinds of ethical considerations have to be done, and is there anything that has to be left out that you know you cannot put into written form? And the same to you, Carolina, with your work in communities, when you work with communities, and then when you go and create artworks that are to be presented in art contexts, which is a very different thing from working in the communities. So that's my question, and I currently work in a museum it's called the Northern Norwegian Art Museum. It's located in Sápmi, and we are constantly, you know, thinking about collection and collecting and owning indigenous objects and the kind of museological legacy, which is extractive and has been extractive, and, you know, how to shift perspectives moving into the future.
Bárbara, you want to start with that answer?
Bueno, I will try
Well,
to speak English. Is very bad. I think we need to take a breath about this kind of topics, because it's not easy, and I spent so many years working with them, with the elders, and to work together, and that's very difficult because there's so many dimensions that we can't share. We lost a lot of memory of how we can understand land and nature, and they know exact the way to do that. So canasto, how do you say a canasto?
Basket.
A basket, no, an older basket. You can think that is to put things on, but it really helps the indigenous communities to clean the seeds in the rivers, no? And when you think about that and you understand the how they made that and why, and with what kind of knowledge is and process that is very hard to understand, and it's very hard to do because it's the body in action in knowledge. I don't know how to do that if you understand that, because the body work in the action of knowledge. So when we think about technology, this is a way and a kind of technology, not only the basket, but all the information that is behind the basket and in the ¿cómo se llama eso? La estera, the plant
reed.
that they use,
the reed to
the
weave
reed
the
and the
basket.
plant. So the plant it has a story, and the way they wave and connect the lines are a mathematic thing, but we don't understand that because we don't have that relation. So I think we can make questions about these topics. I think we need time to talk, and we need time to to understand that we don't know really, and we need like a gap to understand the difficulties or the void that we have as Occidental people to understand the relationship between an artifact with technology and land and body. It's not, and cosmos also, no? So it's very, I think this is very interesting. I've been working on that for many years. And it's amazing how we can really change the way that we think about objects, or what we think about a tool, a wood tool that could be completely or hierro. How do you say hierro?
Iron. An
Iron
tool.
An iron or a stone tool. And because it's a force that is inside of the object that can produce many things. And even it can, if you don't use it well, it can open an energies that are not good for us. And we can see that in the world that we are living in. So sorry, my English is very bad, but I think I just a little explain of that complex. And one little thing, the book has chants, and we needed to record that chants. So the book has augmented reality, because we needed a technology to take the small chants for the women, because they can sing for 4 days without, not non-stop. But we record very small pieces that they produce, and they understood the intention of these little pieces of orality. So we put that on the book because, as I said, the book is an object to talk about things and to reconnect ourselves, not to like
capture or congelar, to congeal, to freeze knowledge in there, no?
Exactly.
It's to activate it.
Yeah.
Thank you, Bárbara.
Thank you for your...
I think we have like 3 minutes left, so I'm gonna maybe say one of my own protocols. But before that, I just want to acknowledge that there's a lot of violence going on. I want to acknowledge the genocide going on in Gaza. I can't, not use this platform to do that. One of my protocols is to understand that when there's work done with and for and by a community, sometimes there's no need to translate it into the white cube or the institution. So you will see some of the work that we've done in community and with the communities, that they maybe exist as a photograph that's shared maybe in lectures, but I have no intention of printing that on cotton rag paper, framing it and selling it in the art world. So I've learned also that there's different and parallel kind of lines of work. One that is maybe more intended for that institutional market-driven context of some of the art circuits I function in. Others that, for example, reciprocal sacrifice that is in Oriel Davis, and that was done with the Nez Perce language department, that because of a contract and a protocol I agreed with the tribe, cannot be sold, cannot be shown in places that demand an entry fee, and that exists available to everyone online on the different YouTube channels. And there's a number of works that I produce that way that maybe do enter the institutional circuit, but do not enter the market circuit, but also exist in other circuits like the own tribal circuits and their own channels. And then there's work that doesn't even come into the institution at all, and that remain as collective experiences, that maybe there's some documentation that permeate some spaces of the art context, but are not, there's the intention, there's never an intention to try to translate that to a public that did not experience it and was not there at the moment and was not for them. And so it exists for and with the community, and that's it. That's enough.
Thanks for those answers. And I see we're running out of time. That was well timed. Carolina, I think you're on the spot. Do you want to welcome Melissa back to the conversation with some closing
Melissa,
remarks.
I wanted to acknowledge too our BSL interpreters and our Spanish to English, English to Spanish interpreters. I know it's hard work, so thank you so much for supporting our conversation that way.
Thank you, Carolina. Diolch yn fawr iawn. Thank you so much, Carolina, Liv, Fern, Bárbara, for your generous contributions and introducing us to your practices, approaches, research, and ways of working, practices that highlight our contract with nature, connection with ancestral memories, principles of emergence in sacred spaces. Heddwch nain Mangi, the Old Woman's Peace petition that Fern noted earlier, will be exhibited at St. Fagans next year, I believe. Thank you to everyone who has helped behind the scenes, Nikki, Sam, Alexia and Javi, Letty Clark from Artists Mundi, who's developed at the Table Talk series, and Jane Matthews, who've been supporting the tech this evening. Thank you to Arts Council Wales. And lastly, a big thank you to everyone who's joined us this evening online. The last At the Table Talks will be with Taloy Havini in January, on the 10th of January at 7 p.m. Details could be found on our website, so please register for this last talk. And from me and the whole team at Artists Mundi, we look forward to seeing you again very soon. Good evening.